Hello, I'm Greg, and this is the 7th and probably the next to the last video in my series on how to write Q Bert from scratch in Unity. In this video, we fixed a few more bugs, and I begin adding the infrastructure to be able to flip a platform to multiple colors. So grab your favorite beverage, pull up a chair, and follow along as I teach you how to write Q Bert from scratch in Unity. So we're kind of getting toward the end of this series. I noticed when I was doing some testing after the previous video that there's a few more bugs that we need to fix. One of them is really more of a potential bug. Sometimes it happens when testing and sometimes it doesn't. Essentially, I have scripts that rely on other scripts, and if you try to reference a script, especially a singleton, before it's been instantiated, you can get a null reference exception. So to fix that, we'll go into our project settings and we will select script execution order. And I know that the enemy manager calls the game manager. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this little plus sign here. And I'm going to add the game manager. And then I'll click the plus sign again and add the enemy manager and click apply. This will make sure that the game manager is loaded before the enemy manager tries to reference it. So that's one bug off the list here. Next, fix bad ball off edge location. So I noticed when I was testing, so bad ball spawns at the top of the scene and then he jumps down randomly and then jumps off the edge. And that all works fine, except when he jumps off the edge, I'm setting the out of bounds location to be down off to the left somewhere. And so he kind of jumps through the board. Like if he jumps from here, he'll kind of go disappear through the board. So to fix that, all I have to do is change his off edge location. So I think I fixed that in the bad ball script. Yeah, so this is out of bounds. So we're going to want to change that to, instead of being -5, -5, -5, I think when I was playing around with it, that values of 14, -5, 3 would work. And so I'll show you what I mean. If we go back into the Unity editor and we go into our prefabs and our enemies folder, and drag a bad ball into the scene. So right now he's up at 0, 21, 18. Now if we send him off the edge where we had him, -5, -5, -5, that's down here, which as you can see, if he's jumping from somewhere on the right side, it's not going to look right. But if we use the values we just gave him, we'll go again and look at our script here. Bad ball. If we use 14, -5, 3, that looks like a much more sane position to jump off the board to. So let's give that a test. I think that should work fine. And to help reproduce it a little bit, I'm going to go into our resources, managers. Actually, I don't need to. Yeah, game manager and then the enemy manager. The enemy manager currently has a bad ball, an UG, and a wrong way. I'm just going to remove wrong way and UG. So we only spawn a bad ball. I will hit play. And then after Coily spawns, I'll pause the game and I'll deactivate Coily. So we'll go back out here, expand, don't destroy, unload, expand managers, expand game manager, scroll down and find Coily and just deactivate him. So now he's no longer going to be jumping. Unpause the game and let me get out here before bad ball spawns and let's just watch him jump and see where he goes. Whee! Yeah, that looks a lot better. Okay, so that's 2 bugs fixed. The other thing is wrong way clings to empty space. So if you remember, we added wrong way in the last video. And wrong way is the brownish spider. We'll drag him into the scene. You see he can cling over to the edge here. The problem is, if he's up here, he's clinging to empty space. So something is wrong with the way we're raycasting to see if he's on a valid spot. So you remember, we changed it so he would raycast in the forward direction, or in the Z axis. Z is always forward. And then right now, looking at this, that looks fine. This is forward. But I think the problem is, the way I implemented it, is I wasn't using his transforms forward. I was using vector3.forward. Let me go into the script enemies. I think it's an enemy base. Let's expand this up here. Actually, I think what I want to do is look at the board manager. Landing out of bounds. Yeah, it's right here. So in landing out of bounds, we're taking this Boolean that says if he's a sidewalker. And if he's a sidewalker, we're doing a raycast vector3.forward. And then if he's not a sidewalker, we're doing a raycast vector3.down. The problem is vector3.forward is not going to be the same as his transform.forward. So I'm going to have to do some refactor. So I'm going to refactor this function. Instead of taking this Boolean, sidewalker equal false, I'm going to change this to be a vector3, and I'm going to call it probe direction. And then the monster, the enemy, will call this and pass in the appropriate direction. So we'll no longer be doing this if sidewalker. And then to help debug this, I'm going to add a debug draw ray using our calculated position, the probe direction times 2, and then we'll give it a red color, and we'll make that probe last for 5 seconds. And then we're going to return, if we don't hit something in our probe direction out to a distance of 2, we're specifically looking for just platforms, then we will return true. That means we're out of bounds. So if we don't hit a platform in that direction out to a distance of 2. Now, we just broke a bunch of things. Everything that's calling landing out of bounds is going to have to be modified now to pass in the correct value. So let's see. We got a couple of red lines here. All right. So we are calling from legal jump locations. I think in this case, we can just do vector3.down. That's always going to be down. I forgot. So we were not passing in the sidewalker parameter because that was a default parameter. We need to add this as a second parameter, vector3.down. And down here, same deal. We just want to add vector3.down. That should handle that. There should not be any more errors in here. So let's look where else we call this function from. So we handled everything from the board manager. Let's go look at where we call it from enemy base. So in the jump method, we get our random jump location, and then we're calling the board manager to say, is that out of bounds? And so by default, most enemies are always going to check vector3.down. And that should do pretty well. I see a bunch of yellow. I think these are things that Ryder is just warning me about, protection levels and variable names and stuff. And I could go and clean all that up, but I think I'm just going to leave that for now and focus on the things that I know are broken. Let's go back into that landing out of bounds and see where else it's called from. We call it from Q Bert. So Q Bert is also going to use vector3.down. So that should be fine. And UG, I believe that UG is the one that's going to use, we're going to use our transform dot forward. Are we saving our transform in here? If anything, the base class would be instantiating that. Let me go look at the base class and see if we've got our transform. We do. We have a transform. It is protected, so we can access it. We are caching it in awake, so that should be fine. Let's go back into UG, and where we are calling landing out of bounds, I think we're just going to say transform.forward. And that should handle for both UG and wrong way, because wrong way uses the same script. And they should be oriented correctly so that their z-axis is pointing toward the wall that they're clinging to. So let's go back into Unity. And we're going to go back into our controllers, our game manager. So resources, managers, game manager. And back here, we're going to add back, we go to our prefabs enemies, we're going to add back UG and wrong way. And let's just play around with it and see how it looks. I have one that I already instantiated. So what we're looking for is we want to make sure there's never any cases where UG or wrong way are clinging to empty space. Let me get rid of that extra UG or extra wrong way. He was not removed when I lured Coily off the edge. Because he was not created by the enemy spawner, the enemy manager, and so he wasn't in the list of enemies to get removed. I jumped off the edge. Oh, it didn't throw me off the edge, though. It didn't do that animation. So there's another bug to add to the list. It also didn't respawn the player. Let me go look at that to-do file. I had not run into that before. I guess I can handle that when I fix my Q Bert death conditions. Because I did notice a couple of things. Usually what I was thinking of there is if he gets hit by an enemy and then jumps off the edge, he just kind of freezes, but it plays the sound of him jumping over the edge, and it just doesn't handle that correctly. So I want to handle that, but we'll get to that after we fix these other bugs. So let's test some more. So I know a lot of YouTubers, I don't know this, but I suspect a lot of YouTubers that do game development sanitize their code before they show it to the world in their videos. But I think it's instructional and helpful, especially for new developers, to see the kind of bugs that you can run into and how you would go about debugging them and fixing them. So full transparency, you can see even after all the years that I've been doing software development, I still write bugs. So I think to reproduce this, I'm going to have to turn off Coily and Bad Ball. So let's go back into our resources, managers, game manager. We'll get rid of Bad Ball. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to expand this again. I'm going to go into our prefabs. I'm going to drag UG in where wrong way was. And then I'll add another wrong way. And then when Coily spawns, I'll disable them again. And there's Coily. Disable him. Unpause. So now I should only get Uggs and wrong wings. Okay, so he looks good. He jumped off the edge. Well, that's kind of cool. They kind of crisscross. I don't have any logic to keep multiple enemies from occupying the same space. Oh, that was a problem. See if they do it again. Oh, wow. That was interesting. Okay, pause. Of course, he's already there. He spawned there. So that was a spawn position error, not a jump position error. So I need to fix his spawn locations. So if we select him and look at his position, it's basically 0, 0.2, -3. So for all intents and purposes, it's 0, 0, -3, which is this one here. So we don't want him to spawn there. Basically, remember all of these are always 3 higher on the X and Z axis. So we're going to change this one to be 21, 0, 18. And then I'll just move it to the bottom so it'll be sorted correctly. And now he should never spawn in that illegal spot. Good. So instead of clinging here, he jumped off the edge. Same thing up. What in the world? Go back and look at our wrong way prefab. Oh, I must have been in play mode when I changed that. 18. Okay. Ugg can spawn there, that's fine. Okay, let's give that another try. Oh, I need to extend the floor. He spawned here and fell down. Yep, I need to extend the floor over there so he has something to stand on. Okay, it looks like that logic is working. Let me just extend the floor. So we'll select the floor, pick the resize tool here. That's probably good enough. Give it another quick test. See if one spawns here and if he doesn't fall through. Yep. All right. So that's another bug fix. Go to Project, To Do. Now, I've noticed sometimes the enemies get knocked off their center when they collide with one another. And I've tried to handle this through physics layers, but I think that sometimes they even clip the colliders of the platforms and they don't end up in the exact right position where they're jumping to. Like I'm using Do Tween to animate them to the jump location, but if they kind of brush or clip the edge of a platform, it kind of knocks them off their path. And then it gets exaggerated the farther and farther they jump. Especially, I notice this happens to coily. So to fix this, it's going to be really, really simple. I'm just going to go into their rigid body settings. So I'm going to go into the prefabs for the enemies. We'll do coily first. We'll go into the rigid body. And actually, I should do this in code, because I don't want their position to be frozen after they jump off the edge. Because when they jump off the edge, they're going to jump to a certain point, and then gravity is just going to let them fall the rest of the way. And if I freeze their position, they'll jump to a certain point and then just sit there. So let's actually go look at the code I need to change. So first we'll go into the enemy base. And we're going to want to add a rigid body. And we'll make it protected so that the child classes can access it. All right. And I guess we can just grab that thing and on enable, or in awake. Say rigid body equals get component rigid body. And then in on enable, right here, we'll say rigid body dot constraints equals rigid body constraints freeze all. So we don't want him to have any, we don't want physics to move him or rotate him. So we're freezing everything on him. All right. So let's go down to the jump function. And if we're landing out of bounds, this is where we're going to do our do jump to an out of bounds location. And we want to, I think before we do that, we're going to want to turn off those constraints. So right before this do jump, I'll say rigid body dot constraints, and I'm just going to freeze this rotation. There. So now, by default, enemies, when they jump off the edge, they'll be able to keep falling with gravity. But otherwise, if they're just jumping around the board, physics will not move them or rotate them. And I want to do something similar with Q Bert. So I believe that Q Bert already has a rigid body, so that's fine. And I think a good place to do that, yeah, this reset Q Bert function. I think down here would be a good place. Right here, we're clearing out his velocity and angular velocity. I think that would also be a good place to set his constraints to be freeze all. Because we're manually moving him. We're not using physics to move him. Then the only other question is, I'm guessing he's also going to have a jump out of bounds. So kill Q Bert. I think this would be a good place to do it. So we will say rigid body dot constraints, and we're just going to freeze rotation like we did for the monsters. Okay, I think that should take care of it. I'll just play around a little bit and make sure I didn't break anything, because that was a bug that was kind of hard to reproduce. But as long as everything still works, I know I didn't break anything, I can proceed with confidence. Actually, I need to go back into our resources, managers, game manager, and let's go ahead and add bad ball and get rid of the extra wrong way. So Q Bert's still jumping around okay. Looks like Coily's still jumping around okay. The monster, Ugg is jumping around okay. Now, that put him where he jumped to. I think I'm going to change that logic to put him where he jumped from. So he was killed mid-flight, and it moved him to where he was jumping to. And I don't really think that's what I want. I think I want it to be where he jumped from. Alright, but it doesn't look like it broke anything by freezing those positions. So let me go back into our to-do list. Fix Q Bert death conditions. So I think there's a few things I need to fix regarding the death conditions. Let's go into that Q Bert script, go up to the top, expand this a little bit more. So I've got this start position and landing position. I believe I want to add another one here, and I'm going to call it jump origin. And I'm going to initialize that to vector 3.0. Okay. And let's go down to on collision enter, because this is where he gets hit by monsters. Now here I'm checking if I'm not jumping and I collide with something, I just return, but I think I also want to handle if I'm dead. So if I jump off the edge, I know I'm setting him to dead before I start that jumping off the edge animation. So I think what I definitely want to do here is I want to check and see if I'm dead, and if I am, just return. So I can't be killed after I start jumping off the edge because I'm already dead. All right. Something else I'm going to do, hopefully in this video if we have time, depending on how long these bug fixes take, is I want to change the way we flip the platforms. Right now we're flipping between different materials, but on my to-do list you may have noticed I want to have multiple flips at higher levels, so you have to change from one color to another and then another before you actually have truly flipped the platform. And then maybe even have to go to a third color at even higher levels. And so I'm going to change that a little bit and do a little refactoring. There's just a little heads up of something that's going to be coming up hopefully later in this video. Let's go down and look at where we jump off the edge. Jump off edge. I think I want to check and see if I'm dead here too. Because it's weird that I'll start playing the jump off edge music when I've already been killed by being hit by a monster. So same thing as the other condition, just in reverse. And finally, let's go look at where we do our jump. Perform jump. So right here, I want to save our jump origin. So this is our current position. So it'd be transform.position. So when we jumped, we set a landing position. And the game manager is using that landing position. You may remember when he respawns Q Bert. I'm going to change that landing position here to be jump origin. Yeah. Landing position will be jump origin. Let's go into game manager. So reset Q Bert spawn position. There's a Boolean saying use last position, and we're using Q Bert's landing position. So if that landing position is his jump origin, we're going to put him back where he jumped from. So let's go ahead and give that all a test. Jump around and we'll let someone kill us. Alright, so he killed me here. He respawned me at my jump origin. Which was here. So I guess I got killed before I jumped. So I should respawn back. Well, game's over now. But yeah, I think that worked the way I wanted it to. And I can't remember if there were any other Q Bert death conditions. Well, let's see what happens if I jump off the edge. We haven't tested that, and I do seem to remember seeing something odd when we were testing earlier. So that worked. That did not work. That's interesting. It put him on the floor. So it's interesting that it didn't do the jump animation as near as I could tell. And then he ended up standing on the floor. Almost looked like his collider was interacting with the floor, but I don't think that's the case. If we go look at his prefab, he's on the player layer. The floor is on the floor layer. And player does not interact with floor. So I don't think that was the case. I think the fact that it looked like he was standing on the floor meant that his rigid body constraints, his position was still frozen. So we weren't clearing those when we did the jump animation. He still should have jumped, however, which means something must have interrupted the jump. Let's go look at his script and go down to where we do that jump off edge. All right, so in jump off edge, we're calculating a fall position based on where we're jumping from. We're doing a jump with do tween, that's basically an animation, to that fall position with a jump power of 25, one jump over duration of 1 second. Setting him the dead, and then we're firing the Q Bert died event. So I suspect something in here is interrupting that animation. But one thing I want to do is I want to clear those constraints. You remember we put this line down here, and I don't think we want to do that here. This is when an enemy collides with Q Bert. We want to do that when we jump off the edge. So right here. That'll do that. Now we need to figure out what's going on that's interrupting our animation. So the Q Bert died event, let's look at references for that. Oh, that's the game manager. Yeah, let's go look at that. We're calling that method on the game manager. So he is setting the game state to be Q Bert died, and then he's calling handle Q Bert death. Handle Q Bert death delays for 3 seconds and then respawns Q Bert. And this is that logic I was talking about. If it's greater than Y, it's going to use his last position. Otherwise, we're going to put him back to the start position. And so since it never finished the animation, that's where it put him, was on the floor. So I don't think this is the problem. I think the problem has got to be in here. When we set this state, we fired this game state changed event. So somebody that's listening to that event must be interfering with their animation. So let's find our usages. The enemy base subscribes to that event. So let's go look at their game state changed handler. I think this is it. The enemies, when they get the game state changed event, are killing. Yeah, so this is saying if it's not level complete or Q Bert died, return. Otherwise, if Q Bert died, which is definitely the event we're getting, we're killing the tweens, the animations. And I don't think we really need to do that. Because when this game object goes away, his tweens will go away too. So let's just get rid of that and see if that doesn't fix our problem. We'll go back into Unity and hit play. Oh, there we go. Let's jump off another edge. Let's wait for some enemies to be on the board and do it. There's Coily. Okay, good. I think we have fixed that bug. Good news. So let's go back and look at our to-do list. We've fixed the Q Bert death conditions as far as I know. Now this one, I have a really hard time reproducing this. We can play around with it a little bit, but what I've seen happen sometimes is Coily will just start jumping really quickly. It's like he'll be jumping the normal speed and then it'll go blink, 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 blink. And I don't know why that would be. I've looked at the code, and I honestly don't see what condition would lead to that. So I think I'm going to leave that. And I think the next thing I'd like to work on is actually this one. The ability to flip a platform more than once. But in order to do that, we're going to have to do some refactoring of the way we actually flip the platforms. So if we want to do that, we need to go to our platform. I did Control comma. That will work in Visual Studio, and it works in Rider since I'm using the Visual Studio shortcuts. So that lets me just type in a file name and go straight to it. So we're going to want to change some things in here. We're still going to want this renderer, and we're going to want this flip sound. I'm also going to add a clip for a revert sound. We'll probably get around to adding, I forget the name of the enemy, but it's a ball that hops down, kind of like Bad Ball, but instead of killing Q Bert, he flips the platforms back to a previous color, kind of undoing the work that Q Bert's done. And I think, if I remember correctly, if Q Bert lands on him, it freezes all the enemies on the board for a certain amount of time. I'll have to go back and look up what that enemy's called. But I'm just going to add a placeholder there for a revert sound, and I'm going to get rid of these two materials here. And I'm going to add a new serialized field, and it's going to be an array of colors. And I'm going to call it platform colors. Okay. And now flipped is no longer going to be just a property that we set in here. It's going to be a expression body method. We need to add another variable first. I need to have an integer here called platform color. And that's going to be an index into this array. And then our expression body method to say whether or not this platform is flipped. In other words, if Q Bert has completed getting this to its destination color, the condition will be that the platform color is equal to platform colors dot length minus 1. And I don't think we're going to have this set flipped state method anymore. I think what we're going to have instead is, we'll call it flip platform, and instead of just being a bool, it will take a direction. So we're either flipping it forward, advancing it to the next color, or we're flipping it backwards and advancing it to the previous color. We're not going to be setting a platform material. What are we going to do in here? First, we need to get our new color. So new platform color, and we're going to use the mathf.clamp function. So we're just going to increment the index into the array, but make sure it doesn't go beyond the ends of the array. Or we're going to decrement it if our direction is negative, and we're going to make sure we don't go below 0. So the new value will be platform color plus direction. So we'll pass in 1 or -1, depending on whether we're going forward or backward. And then we're just going to clamp it to 0, so it can't go below 0. And we'll also clamp it to platform colors.length minus 1. So we'll never go beyond the ends of the array. And if we didn't actually change the color, so if that new color is the same as the platform color, we're just going to return and not do anything. Now we need to set our platform color to equal that new platform color. And then we're going to set our platform color. So we've got this function here already. So let's say set platform color, platform colors and we'll give it the platform color index. Now, that's pretty simple. And in this case, we're going to play an audio clip, but it's going to be dependent on the direction. So if the direction equals 1, we'll play the flip sound. Otherwise, we're going to play the revert sound. All right. And we might actually need to put this in an if, because we also want to tell, well, we're going to want to do this regardless. We only want to score points if direction is 1. I can just do it this way. I can say direction equals 1, 25, otherwise 0. So we're just not going to add any points if they're reverting the platform. All right, I think that should handle flipping the platform. Let's add a function to reset the platform. We'll set the platform color to be 0. That's our beginning of our array. And then we'll call the set platform color to be platform colors sub-0, the first one. And we're no longer going to use the set platform material. Now, if you may remember when we originally wrote this, this derives from an interface, because I had envisioned having different kinds of platforms. We really don't need that interface, but it's there. And I'll show you how if you break a contract like I just did, you need to go in and redo your interface definition. Typically, you don't want to do this. Code should be open for extension, but closed for modification. That's one of the solid principles. That's the O in solid, but we're going to violate that principle. I'm going to change this to flip platform int direction. We're going to add another one called reset platform, and then this is fine. Okay, so now we're obviously breaking some other stuff too, like the board manager's broken. What does it not like about this? It's never used. Okay, so it's not really an error. It's just currently not being used. So let's go look at the board manager. Let's see, where do we mess with the platforms? This should all still work. Reset platforms. So here, instead of doing set flipped state, we're going to change this to reset platform. That should handle that. And that may be all we need from the board manager. So now we're also breaking Q Bert. We still seem to have an error in here. Reset platform is never used, but it is. Interesting. We'll see if that error goes away when we try and run. Let's go look at Q Bert. Okay, so jump to platform. Aha. So here, instead of calling set flipped state, we're going to call flip platform 1. So we're flipping it 1. Let me just go back into Unity and see if it will compile. No. So we have reset platform. I don't see what's wrong with this. Let me temporarily delete this. Go up to here. Implement missing member. Oh, it needs to be public. So let me just go back. Put that back and then just make this public. And there we go. All right, let's go back into Unity. We're going to have to do some stuff in the prefab for the platform. So we currently don't have a revert sound. And we don't have any platform colors. So as I recall, if we go and look at our materials, we had platform normal blue, platform flipped yellow. So we're just going to come up to this one and we'll use blue and we'll use yellow. And that should work with the current implementation of only having to flip it once. And it is working. So all we need to see is test the victory condition and make sure if we flip them all, that it recognizes that we did indeed flip them all. Yep. Okay, so we did not break anything with that refactoring. That's always a good sign. So now we have the infrastructure that we need in place to require flipping it multiple times. And I guess to test that, we can come in, add a third color and do something like, let's make it green. Something like that. Now, theoretically, I should have to flip it from blue to yellow and from yellow to green. I hate when I do that. That's where Coily spawns, and if I jump there when he's spawning, he kills me. Yes, so that logic works. Okay, I'm going to revert that change from our prefab. Go back to our little to-do list. So this is only partially implemented. We still need to add the logic to the game manager, probably actually the board manager, based on the level that we're on. I might make it like multiples of 2, like after you complete 2 levels, so multiples of 3. When you get to the 3rd level, we'll increment the number of times you have to flip it. So maybe every 3 levels we'll add a color. But I don't want to just pick colors willy-nilly. I want to go out and search for a palette and find a palette of colors that work well together. I mean, I guess I could just go and play the real Q Bert a bunch of times and see what colors they used. But I think that would be a useful lesson, though, on color theory and going out and finding some existing palettes that look good. But I think I'm going to save all that for another video. So we'll have these two features on deck for the next video, and that may be the last video in this series. I'm really anxious to start something new. I've had some suggestions on my channel. I've had somebody request, I saw on another channel actually, somebody would like to see a joust tutorial. And somebody on my channel has requested Defender. So those are a couple of good options. If you have any comments or suggestions, let me know, because I really want to produce things that people are interested in seeing. Well, hopefully you found that helpful. And if you did, do me a favor and click that like and subscribe button. It really does help me to grow my channel. And like I said, if you have any suggestions or comments, drop a comment below and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck on your game development journey.